The University of Idaho recently welcomed a new risk management educator to the team. Joining us on the PNW Ag Network hotline is the U of I's Colby Field. And Colby, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Risk management, I think it's a term we hear a lot, but what is it? What exactly is risk management?
So agriculture is inherently risky. It is an industry that is dependent on a lot of factors outside of the control of the producer. So prices of commodities, weather, equipment breakdowns, timing. There's a lot of factors that go into, if you're a rancher, disease, if you're, crop diseases, pests, weeds. So there's a lot of factors that impact agriculture that are completely out of the control or very limited mitigation availability to producers. So what we try to do is develop either processes or government programs or private programs that allow to minimize risk, because most farmers are pretty risk saturated and try to minimize as much risk as they can to get a little more predictability in what returns will be from their crop, from their animal production, whatever they're growing. So risk management is the methods and processes to try and minimize risk to your financial return usually.
I imagine a lot of farmers get kind of nervous when it comes to talking to bankers about a lot of pretty private, intimate stuff.
Fairly. I mean, I didn't grow up on a farm personally, but I grew up farm adjacent most of my life, and I have now spent the better part of 15 years almost studying and learning about the different sectors of agriculture, working in them, gaining firsthand experience. So fairly in-depth knowledge, and all of that sort of with the goal of gaining as much experience of what those issues are for producers, and now in my current role to assist them with those challenges.
So Colby, what are the biggest challenges for Idaho farmers, whether they see those issues or maybe they're not quite aware of them yet?
Well, the biggest and most obvious one is commodity prices. Commodity prices and commodity prices. Prices of grain, prices of milk, everything is pretty low because we have a pretty high saturation of supply throughout the world and in the country. So that's a big one. Weather's going to be a big one. No surprise, there's a lot of fires going on right now with the drought in the West, and sort of the impacts of drought. Fire is one of them. Lower yields can be one of them. Other impacts such as that are going to come from water scarcity with drought. So the big ones are, commodity prices, what you're going to hear if you ask a farmer, what are you struggling with this year? My wheat's not worth anything is a pretty common one I'm hearing around the area. I'm in wheat producing area in North Idaho. And then drought is one that's going to be in the back of the minds of a bunch of producers. And we've seen pretty consistent drought over the last 10, 15 years in the West. So drought's a big one as well.
So what's your plan in this position, and how do you think you can help farmers across Idaho?
So we have a good team in the Ag Econ department, particularly in Extension. And so we sort of divide up based on skill sets. There are two area extension educators, myself and then my counterpart in Southern Idaho, Brett Wilder. And we focus on a little bit more outreach and extension rather than the research side of our appointments. And so I have more of a crop background. My counterpart has more of a livestock background, and then focus on a whole bunch of agricultural economics training across the board. Some of the things that I have been specifically asked to address so far is estimates for cost of production, particularly for crops in the state. So we do a survey process to try and determine what the average cost of production would be, put it into a budget so that farmers can compare what things may cost to produce, and then put in their own numbers to see how that compares to the average that we can find. Other areas of specialization that have been specifically asked are family succession planning, with agricultural operations growing to the size of that they are, growing in complexity, and now with being so asset heavy, land being a big one, equipment being a big one, how you pass those extremely asset rich but cash poor operations equitably or fairly onto your next generation so that they can be successful is a big challenge. And so addressing some of the techniques and processes that help with that generational shift is something I've been asked to revitalize and address throughout the state. And then some of my own personal interests, I have a lot of interest in sort of up and coming soil health oriented production practices and determining from an economic standpoint whether those processes pay, what of them can be profitable, and how we can assist them in being profitable or at least break even for producers. So getting involved with some of those projects that are very multidisciplinary, from a soil rotation, from a soil amendment, from a crop rotation standpoint, and sort of doing an economic assistance to evaluate the viability of some of those new up and coming methods. Sort of a precision ag soil health oriented view.
Do you think farmers understand the challenges that arise when it comes to passing a farm, a property from one generation to the next?
I think there's an awareness of the challenges. I think there's also some reticence of engaging in the process, some procrastination, because it's uncomfortable subjects for families when you work with your family every day, sitting down and having a conversation of, well, this person, this kid's going to get this because they've been on the farm working with us, and the kids that are off farm are going to get less, are not going to get the business, but we want something to be equitable for them to have some of this legacy. But our main goal is to keep the farm going. Those are uncomfortable conversations to have. And then anytime you mix finances in the mix, that can make it even more uncomfortable. But I think farmers are aware. It's how do they do that sensitively, equitably, and efficiently is where the struggle is. So that's an area where I think Extension can try and give them an assist for those processes to sort of ease that transition. And yeah, it's extremely difficult when you're talking about large asset operations to do that transfer so that the farm can continue to be successful.
And Colby, before we let you go, if somebody wants to learn more, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably the most efficient is emailing me. My email is cfield@uidaho.edu. It's also on the U of I website. And that's probably the most efficient way. My email is always in my pocket, always on. We also have resources on the Idaho Ag Biz website. If you just Google Idaho Ag Biz, AGBIZ, that will bring you to a page with all of the faculty that's sort of in this farm management space and a lot of the resources we have out there. Sort of my goal for this position is to become a resource for primarily producers, but stakeholders of any sort interested in agriculture throughout the state on how to ease some of the challenges, the economic challenges there. And I view risk management as a pretty broad topic, not just marketing grain, trying to do financial hedging, those pieces, but across the board, ways that you can reduce risk by implementing practices or changing the way that you think about these problems. And so, my goal is to be that resource to ease some of those problems. So at the end, I really want to hear from producers what they're having challenges with in order to address those problems.
Colby Field with the University of Idaho, thanks so much for joining us right here on the PNW Ag Network.